Thank you so much. This is a really exciting screening series for us to be a part of. I commend Cinema Politica for the way they are trying to change the way people watch movies. And filmmakers always hope that there are people working hard to change the way people watch movies because you know, we want you to see the movies. And to see this in a beautiful cinema. And this is special for us too because Fernando is able to be here. Ben and I have been able to do screenings around the world. Fernando's only been able to do Sundance and in Mexico the premiere and here and a couple others. So this is special that we've been able to drag him up to Montreal for this special screening. Yes, please. You'll understand. You'll understand soon enough because the film, we're proud that Fernando and the other residents of Bisbee were able to share their personal lives and how that interacts with the past and with what happened in Bisbee is a significant thing, and we were lucky to capture it and to turn it into what we were able to turn it into. So we're excited to be back for a Q&A. I can't thank Bruno and RDM enough. This is truly one of the best film festivals in the world, playing some of the most radical, interesting nonfiction, which is the most exciting area of filmmaking for my money. And RIDM has been on the forefront of leading the way in playing the best stuff in the world. And we're very privileged and very proud to be a part of that. So we'll be here afterwards. Very, very excited to be here afterwards. Enjoy the film. We'll see you after. Thank you so much. For each of you. Well, for me, I've been going to Bisbee since 2003. My mother-in-law bought an old mining cabin that we turned into it was like, just an old weird cabin that we were like, this is a good place for a family vacation, which is weird. It's a weird place to decide to go have a family vacation. And I fell in love with the place instantly. It was my first time in the desert, and my first time in a place like that. I came from a small town in the southeast in North Carolina, and which is a place that it doesn't have the kind of passion behind it that Bisbee does. So. I also just fell in love with the plants and the animals and just the whole idea of being in the desert, and I could breathe better in the desert, and I loved it. And then the same trip of falling in love, I found out about the deportation. I started to read Bisbee 17, which was a novel about the Bisbee deportation written by Robert Greene, and we stole his title, which is legal. You can do that. You can steal a title, and we know for sure it's legal. Anyway, and I was appalled and horrified, and also, it's 2003, so it's George W. Bush was president, and there was this idea at the time that we weren't told things in the U.S., and we weren't taught everything that we should have been taught to arm ourselves for what we were going through then. Of course, now it's so much worse, and so we need to be armed again, I think, or we need to be armed with our history, because obviously just knowing that things are not bad now, and that's not just a blip in the history of so-called democracy. It's the nature of it, actually. And that was very profound and scary, and I knew this was many years before I made my first feature film, and my first idea was, hey, let's reenact this with the locals. And I didn't even like documentary reenactment. I think documentary reenactment usually is garbage and boring and terrible and reinforces really dumb ideas about the world rather than challenges them. And so I didn't know what that meant at all, but I clung to it, and then we started the project. We were done with my last film, which also played at RIDM, and I was supposed to be taking a break, but then I saw that the 100th anniversary of the deportation was coming up, and I said this was the time to make the film. So what's your relationship to Bisbee?
It's actually funny, my relationship with Bisbee, because when my mother went to prison, thank you, Canada, for having us. When my mother went to prison, I was 7, so I needed a legal guardian to stay with, and my aunt was living in Naco, Arizona, which is literally border town of Naco, Sonora. And I moved with her to get an education, but when I moved to Arizona, I didn't get much education. The school system in Arizona is not the best. So now I got such a good education just working with you guys and being able to be part of this beautiful movement. That's how I have a relationship with Bisbee. It was because of education, and it didn't give it to me till somebody else was like, hey, let's make this be seen and heard, and that is my relationship with Bisbee.
Robert has been talking about Bisbee for as long as we've been working together, which has been almost 10 years. And when he told us that the 100-year anniversary was coming up and we had to get to Bisbee immediately, as the producer, there were a lot of things we needed to start doing, but one of them was finding an actor to dress up in a period-appropriate costume, just as like we were doing camera tests and we were playing with lenses and stuff like that, but to find someone that could kind of act as this past and present history walking through the town in a period costume. And we started working early on with this real estate agent that we found through Robert's mother-in-law, and we quickly learned when you work in a small town like Bisbee, finding a real estate agent to be your best friend is a smart move. And I mentioned to her that we needed to find someone to act as this miner, and she recommended Fernando and sent pictures to me, and I was like, this guy's absolutely perfect. Robert was like, he's too pretty. There's no way this is ever gonna work. And I said, like, let's give it a shot. And we met Fernando at like sunrise on our last day shooting, and he put on this costume, and within 10, 15 minutes, he was telling us these super personal stories, and I think we all knew it was gonna be a great fit.
Yeah. That's just proof that directors don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And I think actually the words she uses, "You're an idiot." Obviously, this guy should be the star of our movie. And I was like, okay, fine. What, I guess I'll deal with it. And obviously, here we are. What's at stake for us all is different. I think, Fernando, probably what's at stake for you is this is your home. So I'll let you speak about that. But for us, I mean, we didn't start off wanting. It wasn't simply about telling the story of the deportation. Bisbee is a place that needed a movie to be made about it, and that was a dream for me. Like I feel like I had been in a way working my whole life to make the film about Bisbee. So when you put that kind of pressure on yourself, like I love this place, and somehow I've gotten into some sort of situation where I can be the person who directs the film, obviously, and collaboration is the biggest part of the film. So Bennett producing and Jared cinematography, and obviously the entire town collaborating, which actually takes some of the pressure off because it was all of our project. It wasn't like just me. It was all of us together. But just that idea that you have such a lofty goal of making something that's so personal and important to you. And then the truth was that when we started the project, it was October of 2016, so a month before Trump was elected. No one thought he was going to win, and we thought it was more like, let's try to tell a labor story in a time where labor stories aren't okay, or no one can tell them, because there's all the labor stories have supposedly been told. And that these songs, for example, the Industrial Workers of the World songs, they all feel anachronistic, or they feel like they're not a part of our current, a way of living. But then when you listen to the words, and they talk about poison and corruption and corporate greed and all these things, and you're like, no, that's worse now than it was 100 years ago. And so, just the idea of telling that story, but then Trump gets elected, shit gets way bad and worse and worse and worse. And then by the time we had been staging at the end, when we were staging these large-scale recreations, the entire town knew what was at stake in terms of what these images would mean and why we all needed to make them now. And that was not us being brilliant. That was literally the town saying, you have given us a chance by showing up, and we're going to run with this ball that has been given us. And so what you see takes place is the town grabbing the story from the ghosts and saying this is our story, and that's what was. So what was at stake was the legacy of the story, and getting it wrong would be a very bitter failure. So we all made it together. But for you, I think, Fernando, probably you're shy, and this is your hometown. So what was at stake for you to be a part of this?
It is my hometown, but I feel that I am home right now because I feel very accepted here, and I feel wherever you take your heart, you are at home. But what was at stake for me is being able to deal with my personal issues. And I guess I was letting go of fear, what was at stake for me, because I was never really open about my feelings or my history or what had happened between me and my mother. So it was just about just being open and being able to share that with you guys and with all of you guys and with myself. So it was just a fact of letting go.
And I would just say that I feel like for us, one of the biggest challenges and the most rewarding thing about this film was I was so nervous that we would get so many people in this town to kind of sign on to recreate this episode in the history. A lot of the people in the town that are still there to tell the history are people that did the deporting. And a lot of the people that are on the side of the deportees are new people that have come into town, whether they've been there 20, 30 years. And for me, one of the most important parts of telling this story was everyone kind of was waiting for us to ask them their stories and their opinions. So it wasn't easy by any means, but it was a lot easier than I had anticipated because people just wanted to, whatever side they were on, kind of share their thoughts and opinions and their family histories.
It's been seen, which is really nice. So we opened the film in New York and then went right to Arizona. Most of the time you open your film in New York and you go right to LA. We went to Arizona and did a tour of Arizona. And it's been seen, relatively well. I mean, it's a documentary. People don't show up for documentaries a lot of times, but it's been seen as much as we could have hoped. It's not too. It played for 6 weeks in Tucson, for example. It's still playing in Bisbee. Actually, played tonight in Bisbee. We've had multiple sellout screenings in Bisbee, and they're screening it every single Monday until the end of the year in Bisbee. So it's playing all the time. So it's been seen, and I mean, I hope our hope is that the story doesn't go away. I mean, we came back to Bisbee for the 101st anniversary. We had a 2-day symposium where we had a series of conversations and then screened the film several times. And then we want to come back every year for the anniversary of the deportation because I'd like to think that not just the normal documentary audience that shows up and pats ourselves on the back for going to see movies, will come to see this movie. Partly because I think it does respect the idea that there could be complication in something so seemingly black and white as 2,000 people rounded up at gunpoint. There's still in Bisbee. It's a company town, so the existence of the town is predicated on what the company wanted to do and what they thought was, it's not like a lot of places where you have a town and a company comes in and takes over. The company invented this town, and so there's loyalties to the company that persist today, as you see in the film. And I hope that, if we continue to play it, everyone curious will come out, and I hope that continues in the broader Southwest. But today the election was incredible. I mean, that's the first time since the 70s that a Democratic senator. She's also the first openly bisexual senator in the U.S. Senate. She's the second youngest woman, and it's fucking amazing. so it's great. Do the people feel guilty? Is that what you said? That's very, well, I mean, what's crazy is that, you sense in the film, there's a lot of shame for the deporters. But do they feel guilty? No, I think they actually feel justified. I mean, of course, one of the things that, when Dick Graham, who's still defending the deportation to this day, and to be fair to Dick Graham, he's an amazing man who worked his way from the very bottom to the top of a company. Why would he not believe in the company when you go from cleaning the tracks from your own work? He saved a man's life in the mines. He's a man who, there's a mineral named grammite after a mineral that he found when he was a 14-year-old boy in the mines. He's not a phony, in terms of his own care for Bisbee and his care for those mines. But he still says, my grandfather said that this was the right thing to do, and I believe my family. I'll tell you 1 second. But he says that there's how do you get 2,000 people to keep a secret? We don't answer that in the question, but that should be a chilling question for everyone in this room and everyone in the world. It's because it's popular, that's how you get 2,000 people to keep a secret. It's because it's a popular thing. So that's one of the most upsetting lines of the whole film to me, and especially because it doesn't need to be answered, frankly. What happened to them is the bitter irony. So their big idea was, John C. Greenway says, let's take these anti-American revolutionaries who are trying to destroy the capitalist order, and let's send them, because they are anti-war and they're traitors, let's send them to the army base in Columbus, New Mexico, because the army will take care of them. And when they got there, the army said, are you kidding? We're not taking 1,200, men who were kidnapped. I mean, at the time there were no kidnapping laws. Frankly, it took years later for the Lindbergh baby to be kidnapped before they actually 1,200 men. No thanks. But when we have a little rich baby, that's when we invent kidnapping laws in the U.S. But so the army said we're not taking them. So they backed up 45 minutes into the desert. And there was a town called Hermanas near, but a tiny town, and they just kicked them out in the middle of the desert. And so a camp was set up. There's a ton of sort of hearsay stories of people being thrown off the trains or killed on the trains or dying in the desert, but no documented anything. What happened to most of them is that they were drafted and went to the war and went to the front lines. So the irony was that they were, deported for being socialist activists, and they all ended up fighting in the war. The other sad, awful thing is, so as well documented as the event actually was, it got lost to history, but at the time it was very well documented. Not a single Mexican was ever interviewed. No, we don't know what happened to half the deportees. We only had the list of the deportees' names in the last 10, 15 years. Only in the last 15 years were we able to pull that from history and figure out who the names were. But even then, we still don't know. Half the Mexicans were lost. We don't know. So, and that just tells you, even in the documentation, it was racist and destructive.
Mike Anderson, who you see a little bit in the film, he's the ballpark historian. His project, pretty much for the 100-year anniversary, was researching all of the names of the folks that got deported. And through his research, he found some amazing stories. Like there was a man that was deported and ended up in LA, and I think he was LAPD. and rescued like a child from like a speeding car and was on the cover of the LA Times as like an American hero with like no mention of the deportation. So it's crazy because a lot of them actually also went to California.
Thank you.
Okay. Good. Well, okay. Doesn't matter. First there and then back there.
Hi. Thanks for the film.
Thank you.
I found the quote at the beginning really interesting. I can't remember the person's name. Something.
Colin Dickey from Ghostland, yeah.
Yeah. Could you explain where that quote is from?
So the book is Ghostland, and it's literally just a book about ghost towns in America and the U.S. and how the quote is specifically how in a ghost town the past and the present are laid on top of each other as if two towns exist. And I was my wife was reading the book, and we were just starting the project, and she, like I said before, she's as intimately interested in and loves Bisbee as much as I do. We've spent many years there, just going there all the time. We had family. She's born in Tucson, and like Fernando, and has this great relationship with the desert. And she was like, "You gotta read this book." And so I read that book, and that quote stood out as just a very great indicative thing of what it's like to be in a place like Bisbee. Just the post office is the same structure in every way as the post office where they were rounded up that day. And you when you walk down the streets of a lot of towns in the Southwest, you get a sense of it feels like a movie set because of the way people have filmed those towns. And in Bisbee, it feels like a movie. I mean, it feels like when you're walking down, in Main Street in Tombstone Canyon, you feel like, what am I doing here? Like I feel like I'm moving through the past and the present at all times. And I don't believe in ghosts necessarily. I know, Fernando, you feel differently. You definitely believe in ghosts, right? But in New Orleans and Bisbee, there's two places in the world I definitely believe in ghosts. I felt them. I feel the presence all the time. And in Bisbee, it's an interesting thing because it's not just that there's real energy that's coming from those open pits. There's real, the minerals put off energy. It's a little bit like being in a lightning storm. You feel a presence of something. Literally, you feel electrons moving through your body. And I feel like Bisbee has those same, it's a lower voltage maybe, but there's something. And so then you hear stories of how every single family in Bisbee has people who've died in the mines. And then the stories combined with this feeling you have, combines with, all the ghost tours where people are trying to conjure up the ghosts, So it's a place that feels very alive with energy in that way. So, so that quote really resonated.
Well, we found out that we got into Sundance pretty much right after Thanksgiving of last year, and it was really important for us to do a screening for the crucial people in the film, which is like 40, 50 people. So we did a screening out of town for everyone to kind of see it and make sure that they were okay with it. And I'm wondering if you're curious about James West at all. James West, who plays John Z. Greway, who is, at the time we filmed this, the only professional actor in the film. Professional. But I'll let you talk a little bit about how you kind of told him what was going to come out of his performance, if that makes sense.
Well, I want to hear what Fernando has to say about this question, but so far so good, and including James. I mean, James is the most. So Dick Graham said to me, "Thank you for letting me perform my own ideas about the world." He said that sentence to me. I'm like, that's fucking crazy. It's just amazing that a life that he's led to this moment, And then everyone so far has been completely supportive and loving of the film. James, he knows that he looks bad, but we were clear from the beginning. Our whole idea was, we were just meeting him, and we were saying like, hey, your past as someone who's deported people will be used to help make this character come to life in some ways. And he's like, oh, that sounds cool. He he was into it totally. And then at Sundance, he said, you know, you can't go through something like this and not have your opinions changed. You know, so I mean, I don't know that his opinions have completely changed because he's said some wacky shit since then. But like, guy's nuts anyway. But I think he says he supported the film and he's traveled with it, and he says things like, yeah, I just tell everybody he was a real bastard, so that's how I played him. And it's like, okay. But I think that's really honest. Like, that's an honest way of working through your own feelings about the world through a performance. But Fernando, did you like the movie?
Yeah, I think it was great.
No pressure.
But what was really great working with these guys was that we got the freedom to really just be who we are and, you know, speak our mind. So I feel like if people were upset, we had control over saying whatever. Nothing was scripted. Like they said, just feel it out. So if somebody was upset, at the end of the day, you're in control of yourself, and that's on you. And it's not about editing or anything of that. It's just about how you portray yourself. And if you feel like, oh, okay, there's this guy and he plays a bastard, and you feel like you can play that, well, you must be a bastard. Like, it's not something they said, hey, you gotta do this, so I think it's just true colors were shown by the freedom that we were given.
My question for you is, someone that's living in Bisbee, like we've come in and out so many times with this movie, and I feel like it's been so shown all over the community. Like, have you heard anyone super mad about how they were portrayed? Give us the scoop.
No. I just eject myself from that kind of people, or if anything negative is said, I'm like, all right. Yeah.
Who was negative?
No, it's fine.
I just feel like it was a movie that involved as many people in the town that wanted to be involved, and I feel like the only negative stuff we've heard is people that just didn't want to show up or participate, and that's such a small amount of people.
Yeah, it's also a place where you're filming in a bar and some asshole's like, fuck you, camera guy, and it's just this weird place. Like, people are super in your face and like they don't, you know. So but is that the new? Who was negative, Fernando? Everyone loves us. Go ahead. Well, we started, so like I said, been thinking about this for many, many years, and then we started filming in October of 2016. We took 4 or 5 trips to Bisbee, 3 or 4 day trips usually, to start to film, up until the time where we moved there in May of 2017, and then we're there until mid-July. So it was a little bit of trips and then a big chunk of time that we were there, leading up to the 100th anniversary itself. And yeah, I mean, you know, for the finished product, I mean, and it was like really crazy tight editing timeline. Like we had submitted to Sundance just a couple months later. We got it, and I kept editing after the movie was being played around the world and just kept tinkering with it. And finally it's at the whatever you see now. But it's weirdly the exact film that we wanted to make, and at the same time, throughout the whole process, we had no idea how to do it. You know, which is like it's a kind of nice thing that I've made 6 films, and we've worked together on many films, and my producing team have been a part of the whole process, and so like I kind of just trust that we can find the film in the way that I want to, and so it's very much like the concept grew into, and it was really guided by Fernando in a lot of ways. Like the personal, the political, and the historical can be collapsed into one thing. And it doesn't have to be like differentiated. Like you can do all of it at once. And you do that through watching people play roles. And when you're watching someone play a role, you're seeing them try to understand something bigger than themselves and try to understand something outside of themselves. And that process is actually not about the other self. It's about projecting who you actually are. You know, so when you see Fernando say, "We are the IWW" at the end, that's something deep in here, you know, that we didn't even know, he didn't know, no one knew that he was going to say, "We are the IWW," you know. It was just that came out. It was like, as you said before, like it's like a ghost came inside and said, and that's just because that's who you are, and the process just allows you to be more of yourself than normal, maybe, or something. And so you see that again and again and again in the film, where people are working through who they actually are, what they think about their town, what they think about this thing. And so as long as we trusted that and trusted that the people that we were working with would guide us to whatever the movie would be, you know, that was, you know, for example, when the door closes at the end, everyone's, you know, not yelling and screaming. My first take was, we got to have the passion. And they were like, we'd like, the people were saying, like, we want to do one where we're just standing there. And I was like, okay. And that became the end of the movie. Or even when they were pushing and shoving and yelling at each other, that's not something I directed. That's came from the people saying, this is how I feel in this moment. You know, and just if you trust that, then it becomes this thing that outside of anything you could have conceptualized. At the same time, it's exactly the movie we wanted to make for the whole time. Because I'm fascinated with, I have a lot of strong ideas about things, and I think I like my ideas, but I like what happens more than I like my own ideas. What actually happens is going to be way better than whatever my ideas are. And if the end movie is some tension between my ideas and what happened, that's cool. That's exciting. So it's like a control freak and freedom at the same time. Oh, we played the film in Denmark where no one laughed at anything, and it was mortifying because Bisbee is a funny place, and if you're not laughing a little bit, you're not letting other emotions into your heart. You know, like. I feel that the tragedy only really works with the laughter accompanying with it, you know, and Danish people didn't laugh at all, and so I hated that, yeah. So I don't know, I mean, we didn't stay in the screening. I'm glad to hear there was laughter, because it's a funny, weird thing that we did, you know, like we played dress up and deported each other, you know. That's a weird thing to do. It was fun to make, right? We had fun making it. Fernando nods his head, sort of. Yeah, I mean, I think laughter. I mean, well, frankly, I made some funny movies that have plenty of jokes in them. My last movie was deadly serious, a movie called Kate Plays Christine, which played here a couple years ago, and it had no humor in it, and that was a big mistake, and because humor is important. Yeah, it's a great question. There's a series of short films that we made. You can find them, Bisbee, just look up Bisbee 17 short films. It's on Bisbee17.com. There's a whole thing. We made 6 short films. One of them features this incredible account of the stories of women left behind. And it was stuff that we actually discovered while making the film. Our historical advisor was a woman named Catherine Benton Cohen, who is one of the leading sort of academics and historians on the Bisbee deportation. She's from Cochise County. She teaches at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And she found these accounts, and they're incredible. And we had Annie, who is the daughter of Dick Graham, performing these things. And we had it in the movie for a really long time as a scene in the movie. But what it became, this is such a male story. It's men deporting men, and that doesn't mean that women are erased, of course. But it actually felt a little bit like we were putting it in just to have the women's stories in, rather than highlighting them. And so I didn't like that. I felt like it was the wrong decision, and I felt like it actually minimized their stories rather than elevated those stories. And so we put it in a short film, and you get to see her performing them. But the stories are incredible. I mean, we didn't know them when we started. She literally discovered these accounts as we were working on the film and sent them to us mid-production. And we changed stream and was like, oh, we got to include these. So they ended up being a big part of one of the shorts that you can see online for free.
Bennett, want to?
We had Rosa. Rosa McKay was one of the state representatives, who's the woman that you see getting pushed down when she's delivering a telegram. She was actually one of the people that set up the camp for the people that were deported in New Mexico, and was the one rallying for their rights. I think she was probably one of the biggest women that we were able to include.
Yeah, and there's more of her story in that same short. But these accounts are really incredible, and they had never been heard before, and it was really fun to be making the film because it led to things like people discovering other things to send to us, and so it was great. But I hope that makes sense. It was a weird way of like, when sometimes you put a scene in the movie, you end up like tokenizing those scenes, and then it's like, this is just because we want to feel good about ourselves rather than actually doing a good job of explaining what those stories were. And so, yeah, I didn't want to do it that way. But.
What really surprised me was how, like you guys were saying about how it all developed. I feel like Bisbee is this place that it's gone through so much, so a lot of it just resonates there and it stays there. So I can't even think of the word right now, but it's just this, it's kind of like repeating this memory over and over again. And I feel with Robert and the team coming in, that's what really surprised me, that it was done so beautifully, that it was the perfect time to have a film like this be done, and for the whole town to get involved. That's what really surprised me, that it was like, all right, we're just showing up and we're gonna allow this land to just really speak to you and let it control you. And yeah, that's what really surprised me, that everybody was just down to let go and really come into character and let it speak for itself. Because we're just here for a brief moment, but this land is gonna be here when we're gone. So that was what really surprised me, that it was just everybody was so willing to let go and then yet come in and hug each other. Because that's Bisbee. It's such a beautiful community that I can't describe it any other way. Physically dealing with those moments, to me, it's nothing, because I've gone through so much more emotionally that to me doesn't even faze me. So it's just made me stronger inside to be able to deal with a lot of my own personal issues. And then just have someone throw you around, yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's wrong for them, but my spirit's not gonna be broken. I'm gonna be who I am and who I need to be. So